I know. Mike, sorry, thank you. Mike, very nice to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Oliver, and it's really a pleasure to be here. And you know, I'm saying I'm excited to be at Spider, but also at Stockholm University, and to meet you and meet again some colleagues that I've met before. I know so much of your work. You know, Spider is famous in the ICTD space, but I'm really learning a lot just even in my interactions so far, and I do hope to find ways to collaborate going forward. So it's really a pleasure to be here. I put together a big slide deck, but clearly this is designed, I think, to be interactive and a fairly informal conversation. So if you all agree, let's keep it that way. And I can, in real time, edit the presentation based upon everyone's interest and kind of where the conversation leads us. But let me just say that what I have put together is first just a little intro to UN UCS, to this new institute we're trying to build in Macau. So I'll go ahead and present some intro to what we're doing in this crazy new institute in a fairly strange part of the world. And then I have some material on our gender lab and on our peace lab. And again, we can kind of build the suit based upon the conversation and where things go. So UN UCS, the United Nations University Institute on Computing and Society, is an ICTD research institute. It's situated here in Casa da Silva Mendes, which was built in 1905 for a Portuguese settler in Macau, Manuel da Silva Mendes, who was a lawyer, a judge, an art collector, a political theorist, an Asian philosopher and religious scholar. And he did some writing integrating Marxist political theory with Taoism. And and you know, lived in this stately mansion. We took over the building, we being the United Nations University, in the 90s, and the initial institute there was focused on formal methods and software technology. That institute was closed a couple years ago, and it was reconceptualized as the ICTD Research Center called Computing and Society. And UN UCS, based upon how you measure things, is about 6 months old. I've been on site as the director for about that amount of time, and we're really building it from the ground up, except for we inherited things like this wonderful facility and, you know, the basic infrastructures. But otherwise, I showed up and there was one staff person on the ground, and myself and everything we're building from the very beginning. So as I said, we're an ICTD research lab. The university part of United Nations University is a bit misleading. UNU is not really a university insofar as we do not grant degrees. We don't really teach classes. We're a research think tank, and UNU-CS is an interdisciplinary research center with social and computing scientists working in the ICTD area, which you all know very well, so I don't have to acquaint you with what that means. And at least the way I think of it, UNU-CS is kind of an internet startup situated within the UN system. So if you think of an internet startup, you think of something that's flat, entrepreneurial, working at internet speeds, non-bureaucratic, peer-based, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you think about the United Nations, you think of something that's slow, bureaucratic, clumsy, very formal, you know. So basically, there's very little intersections between what we think of as an internet startup and what we think of as the traditional UN system. And I think of that as a fun possibility for UN UCS, which is that we might if we really succeed, infect the UN system in modest little ways to be a bit more like an internet startup and a bit less like a slow, bureaucratic, multilateral body like it currently is. So that's kind of a grand vision. UN UCS is incubating 3 initial research labs, and the lab is basically a research focus area. And so let me gloss those 3 areas. The first one we're calling the Digital Peace Lab, which is looking at ICTs for peace building, human security, crisis response, displacement, and these kinds of areas. And I can give you some idea of some of the research work we're working on in this space. It's an area that I've worked on for about 10 years in the areas of peace building and post-conflict computing. And so it's something that I'm kind of bringing from my Georgia Tech lab to UN UCS in Macau. The other research focus is what we're calling the Gender Tech Lab, which is mostly focusing on women's empowerment, but we're purposefully thinking about it more broadly, to think about gender in terms of issues of masculinity. We have some GLBTIQ projects incubating under the Gender Tech Lab, and so the vast bulk of the work to date, as far as we're conceptualizing it, is around women's empowerment. Gender-based violence is an area that's an example where we're working now. But again, we don't call it the Women Tech Lab, we do call it the Gender Tech Lab. We have an ambition to look at other issues as it relates to gender and ICTs. And then finally, we're incubating something called the Small Data Lab, which, you can tell is kind of trying to take a bit of a wink at the big data buzzword and try to critique that a little bit. The Small Data Lab is not about small amounts of data. In fact, most of what we're conceptualizing in this research focus area is large amounts of data, but it's about a small unit of analysis. It's about trying to empower individuals, communities, households with data, as opposed to especially the UN approach, which would be, you do a household survey such that you could sit a bunch of analysis on a minister's desk. Here we're thinking about, you do a bunch of household data acquisition, whether that's crowdsourced acquisition or a household survey or whatever, such that you can empower that household with actionable intelligence, knowledge, and data. So that's what the small is. Small is not the amount of data, small is the unit of analysis. So those are 3 research areas. One thing that you all need to please take away from this conversation is that we really are a startup. Everything is to be determined. I'm delighted to be here because, we're getting your inputs, thinking about ways that we should be refining our research focus or changing altogether the way we're thinking about this new institute would be exciting. Nothing is set in stone. Clearly, ICTD is too big a space for a research institute in Macau, so we need some initial foci, but again, everything is sort of a work in progress. To give you a sense of kind of how big we are, so that you can know, kind of. Are you laughing at our fellows? It's the bow tie, I think, that's the funniest part. Right now, this is the inaugural set of research fellows that I currently have on staff. Now remember, I started roughly 6 months ago. Most of these people are 2 months or less in terms of their position. They're all kind of either new PhDs or more senior researchers. But this gives you a sense. We're about 5-6 researchers right now. If I had the folks, I would double it tomorrow. And my ambition is to double it again within the next 2 years. So to go to about 10 kind of PhD-ish level researchers over the next let's say in 2016, and then to double that again to around 20 researchers by, say, 2018, 2017. So that gives you a sense of kind of, we're never going to be enormous, but hopefully that's big enough to do something. Our mandate is ICTD and research, output, and policy impact amongst the UN system or member states. But there too, that's too big for 10 or 20 researchers, right? So you can see that we're envisioning 3 initial research focus areas: gender, data, and peace. But in addition, in terms of geography, due to the logic of our physical location, a majority of our initial work is conceptualized for Asia. But some of it is in Africa, some is in Latin America. In terms of Asia, our mandate is for the so-called developing world, so mostly LDCs. And in Asia right now, the places that we're beginning to start project conversations are Myanmar, maybe East Timor, some other parts of Southeast Asia, some parts of South Asia. So, the sort of steering away mostly from the middle income countries, and then the high income countries are more in terms of service engagement than in terms of research work. And that includes Macau itself, which is a very rich city within kind of this strange one country, two systems world that we occupy with Hong Kong and Macau. It's super strange. I'm sure some of you have been at least to Hong Kong, but to live in Macau, I'm telling you, it is really strange. Because half the time I'm like, am I in China? Am I not in China? Is Macau the government that I report to, so to speak, as a UN agency? Is Beijing? I mean, it's really complicated. Finally, in terms of my little intro, what is UNU? Oliver was saying that he's interacted some. I don't know if others of you have really interacted. It is a small, relatively obscure agency of the United Nations. It is an independent agency of the UN, just like UNESCO, UNICEF, ITU, all the ones that you know, the famous ones. But it's relatively teeny. It's not a university, as I already mentioned, really. It's a federation of 13 research institutes, each with a special and specific research focus area. Some are in environment, one's in human migration, one's in all sorts of different areas in 12 different countries. And we're headquartered in Tokyo. And this federation of the institutes, each institute varies quite a bit. So some are more situated at a university and really have a more traditional university feel because they do degree programs with their host university, whereas in Macau, we really are a freestanding research institute that is quite independent in many ways from any specific university or anything like that. And we're the only UN facility in the whole city of Macau, so we're it in terms of the UN presence for the city. So that's my quick little intro to UN UCS. Maybe is there something that, yeah.
You say Macau is very strange. Why was it chosen as the base?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Like so much of the UN, and I'm new to the UN, right? I'm not a UN person. I'm on a leave of absence from tech, and I took this UN job, and I'm learning so much. It's super fun. UN's weird. As I think is the case for almost all UN things, there's some historical path dependency. So in this case, it's actually quite an interesting one. In the 90s, when Portugal was handing back the city to China under the one country, two system process, as a parting gift, Lisbon, Macau, and Beijing got together and negotiated with UNU to stand up and endow this institute. And Beijing and Lisbon created the core funding, which we have to this day. My core budget is an endowment that was stood up by the Portuguese and China PRC governments in the 90s. And then Macau gifted that lovely mansion and provides basically the cost to maintain the building, which, like they pay our electricity bill and that kind of stuff. So in the 90s, as a post-colonial, as the colonist was departing and handing off, in this case, a city back to the local people, they gifted this institute. And it exists to this day as the UNU presence in Macau. And that's kind of the explanation.
How are you're primarily or you're only financed by UN, or do you have other sources?
So right now, we have this thing that I'm calling the core funding.
Yeah.
That is the throw-off from an endowment. The endowment sits in the UN Treasury in New York City, but it is firewalled to UN UCS. So there's no way. The UN University is unique amongst UN agencies insofar as we have no member states, and we do not go to the General Assembly for our budget. It means we have intellectual independence, even though we're a UN.
Which is great.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
And so I have this core budget that's just the throw off from this endowment sitting in, at least ostensibly in New York, where.
But I mean, you're free to go find financing somewhere else.
Yes, and so when I say tomorrow I could add 5 more people,
You can go and.
that's under my core budget. When I say my ambition in another 2 years is to double it again, that's me hoping that I'm bringing in additional money. So I would love to go, I'm talking to a lot of the usual suspects in terms of foundations. We've started some conversations, maybe Sweetacita would have an interest. And so we are talking a lot to IDRC right now and having a visit in January. They're for me at least, a usual suspect. So this ambition of growing to 20 actually is because we bring in some external resources. But it's pretty nice to have this core budget that really nobody can touch, and it just shows up. And I'm not spending anything near to my core budget right now. And another nice thing, unlike so many parts of the world where if you don't spend it, you have to give it back, it just accumulates. So
Oh dear.
it's not a bad deal, for
No,
sure.
it's not.
It's really not a bad deal.
And how is the governance of
Sorry?
the governance of your organization? How is that?
I have an advisory board, and that provides some intellectual inputs and in some,
Guidance.
they, for instance, advise my rector, who's my boss, who's an Undersecretary General of the UN, who's based in Tokyo, on my hiring. So, and then it's complicated. I don't really even understand it yet completely. Some things we have autonomy at the Macau level. Some things have to go to Tokyo, which means at the UNU level, and some things are UN level, like kind of New York, so to speak. But I don't even always know where things lodge. But the simple answer is I have an advisory board, and then I report to an Undersecretary General of the UN, who then his boss is Ban Ki-moon. So it's a pretty flat structure in terms of the UN, And you're all welcome. And one thing I will be doing, in fact, I was asking Oliver about your furniture in this building because I'm renovating. The building we have is really quite interesting, but in the 2 years where the Institute basically was closed, it's fallen a bit into disrepair. I actually just raised some external money to do a renovation. A nice amount of money in some ways to renovate the building. So starting January 2016, we're going to renovate the building internal. I say that just to say that once that's done, I'm going to do some sort of event and would love to have you all come, and we'll certainly email the invitation. I don't know exactly when, because I'm sure you all know the world over, never to trust architects or building contractors. They always...
I think that's a global problem.
It's a global problem. So in theory, everything will be finished second quarter 2016, but right, we all know not to believe that.
Doesn't hurt to be optimistic.
Yeah, I know. But one of the
Okay.
exciting things that we're doing with this building, so it's really, you can't tell how interesting this building is in some ways, but you can maybe tell it's lodged in the side of a hill. And there are these modern additions that you can't quite see because they're actually built into the mountain. And they're here, this is it, and here, these were built in the 90s. And then there's the original building. And what we're doing is we're taking the whole ground floor here and turning it into an event space. And then this, which is the 1999 edition, here we're turning into an exhibition space, a gallery space. And then as you kind of move up, it's quite strange. So if you're standing on our roof, you're actually eye level to people jogging in a sort of exercise path in the mountain. So it's sort of like as you move up this building, you're actually moving more into the mountain, and so every floor has like trees growing at that floor level. So you'd be on the second floor of the building, but you're at eye level of the park. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool, and we're renovating and it. Well,
So how big is it?
I should know square something or others.
No.
Let's just say that it's way too big. We are shutting down 1, 2, 3.
So you're offering spiders some free office space?
Yeah.
Here?
You guys could definitely use space. We have way more space than we need. We're shutting down, closing off 3 parts of the building. It could easily, we could have 50 researchers in the building if we really used it all. And our ambition is to have 20. And we have 15 apartments. We're like sort of a landlord.
Wow, you can live there too.
So we provide housing for our fellows, and we have housing for friends until we run out. But we have 15 right now, and we're only using 5 of them, so we have 10 empty apartments.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Relocation.
Yeah.
How do you, can you talk a little bit about how you recruit the researchers, or how you find your research projects, or how does that?
So the recruitment of the fellows has been just like any, how this always is. We stuck stuff out on the internet. It's a lot of networks, my network, colleagues' networks, your networks. It's one of the reasons why I'm traveling right now around 2/3 time. I'm just always out there recruiting. So it's just the normal thing. It's all of our research staff right now are international recruitees. We have folks from Latin America, Europe, and Asia. I probably will very quickly include somebody from North America and from Africa. Those are 2 people who are in the almost getting their contract phases. I was just telling Oliver it'd be nice to have folks from mainland China. Currently we have nobody. Doesn't help that our website is blocked in mainland China. It's not allowed through their internet filtering. And so, it's harder for us to recruit in the mainland for a variety of reasons, including the fact that we're considered hostile. It's very complicated, our relationship with Beijing, that's for sure. And then in terms of the research focus areas, that's really been an outcome of these kinds of consultations and conversations. It's a calculation in terms of where I think we could have impact, because we're not going to be, we are the size that we are, and we have the reach and the capacities that we have. And so one thing that, I said we shouldn't do is internet governance, because, who wants to be yet another even UN first group working in internet governance, and who wants to step into that pile of food, frankly? So, you know, that would be an example where it just didn't seem a good fit for our size and what we might be able to have as a distinct competence. So it's a conversation, it's about where I think we could have some special impact, you know, be a bit unique, that kind of thing.
Could you give some examples of projects?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that
we
you
why
can-
don't
worked on?
let me, and we stop at 4, is that,
No,
we,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, actually,
4:30.
yeah, but we have an UNO meeting at 4.
Okay.
Or
okay.
I have.
So,
The other one,
let me give an example from our Gender Tech Lab, which is something that we're starting called Grace Asia or Grace Global. And I'll go kind of quickly through these slides, and I'll give you a sense of just one project, and then, yeah, and then we can talk about the Peace Tech Lab projects too. So this is a project that's being developed out of a program called Grace Africa, which is the gender research in Africa and the Middle East and ICT, empowerment. Grace Africa was a decade-long program ran by Inika Boskins, who's one of our principal research fellows, that worked with a network of civil society groups around ICTs and women's empowerment. And this is an IDRC APC project that, you know, kind of morphed into quite, I think, a rich set of research activities in Africa. This is a little dense, this slide, but basically Grace Africa, the original project that more or less concluded in last year in 2014, focused again on women's empowerment and ICTs. It was this network of civil society groups using a participatory and action research framework where each of the civil society participants really own their own research activity, focused on ICTs and women, and sort of designed some sort of intervention. But out of that process, this decade-long process, a research framework or theoretical frame was developed that kind of encompasses the entire activity. So you get kind of this bottom-up approach that meets some top-down framing and theory work. The actual project itself was a lot of sort of these processes of virtual and physical mentorship, workshops, annual meetings, etc., where then each of these civil society groups own some particular individualized ICT research activity. All of this thing came out in these 2 books, which I'm a fan of both of these books. I think they're quite nice. They're freely available on the web if you take an interest. You can download them from the IDRC website. IDRC was the publisher for them. So this is kind of a method and some theory, is essentially what Grace is. And so what Inika is driving right now is Grace Asia or Grace Global, and part of this is, shall we say, a debate between Inika, who's the project lead, and me, who's just the troublesome meddler, because she's so ambitious, she wants to do everything. And I keep saying, well, maybe we need to start with just a small Grace Asia program and then grow it into a...
Do you still have the same partners for this eventually?
No, because the Grace Africa partners are all African civil society.
No, I'm talking about, you mentioned APC and
IDRC. IDRC, as I mentioned, are coming in January, and the hope is that they will be a partner, meaning give money.
Because they are doing a very good job.
I'm a big fan of IDRC. They also struggle a
Me
lot
too.
because
Me too.
their ICT program keeps getting clobbered by the bosses. So, but
And APC is doing a good job also.
yeah.
Throughout
So,
the years.
so I actually, you know, I know some of the APC folks, but I hadn't thought about what it would mean for them to be involved in the Grace Asia initiative, but that's a good idea. And Inika knows those folks quite well, so. So yeah, I mean, our hope is that IDRC will fund some of the field side of this, which would extend beyond our core funding probably. And, you know, we'll see. And they're coming on next month. And the fact that 2 folks from Ottawa are coming is a good sign, right? schlepping all the way to Macau, and it's not, I suspect because they want to spend some time in the casinos. Maybe it is, though. By the way, if you like gambling, I would not recommend Macau. There's a lot more interesting places to gamble than Macau. I find the casinos.
It's supposed to be a gambling haven.
It is, but it's to me a gambling hell. It's just, they're too serious about it. I mean, there's no, I used to live I'm from Los Angeles, so I would go to Las Vegas as a kid. That would be like our little weekend outing. And it's like a party, everyone's having fun. In Macau, they're like serious.
Serious gamblers. Serious
Yeah,
gambling.
Las Vegas is a cultural phenomenon.
What?
Las Vegas is
So I don't find it very, I mean, I'm not really a gambler regardless, but I just don't find it really fun. It just seems like they're all have this idea that they're gonna make money, which of course we know is not true.
Money is the religion, so.
And they're just drinking coffee and then going to the little smoking chamber and smoking and then going back and gambling, which to me is not fun.
Sounds boring.
So,
It's boring.
so would the research project grow out of both the interest or a combination of the interest of the researchers and the funding availability of bodies like?
That's a good question. I mean, the research, in the absence of a donor who really wants to drive things, which we all know is a kind of conversation, the research activity would be, the method and the theory comes from Grace, and then the actual specifics come from the partner civil society group. Now the donor is a third stakeholder, and if it's IDRC from Grace Africa, they were pretty hands-off. They did not say, oh, well, you need to do X and not do Y. But, you know, maybe they're under different constraints now and they would need to be more prescriptive or directive. I doubt it, but it's possible. And of course, we don't have a deal with them yet, so we'll still see. So this is just talking about how the approach for Grace Asia, or maybe Grace Global, or whatever in the end it is that these are individualized studies where each of the civil society groups kind of own their region, themselves, their workplaces, whatever, and then this is all with this overarching method and theory. And yeah, and so, you know, the hope is that this will contribute to some South-South cooperations amongst these civil society actors and so forth. So that's a kind of a project. It's a very vague project insofar as it's a very much a theory and method driven thing that then has an emerging, locally defined set of particularities. But, you know, it gives you a sense of one of the things that we are incubating right now, which is this Grace Asia or maybe Grace Global program. Another set of projects that we're incubating right now, and I don't have slides yet, but because it's really very new, are programs in Myanmar that combine our gender work with our peace work. This is probably work we'll do in Rakhine State. I was just there a few weeks ago. Rakhine State is the place famous for the Muslim community, Rohingya, and we're starting a research project there to explore the use of ICTs, in particular around women communities amongst the Rohingya. And we have some very specific project activities that we're sort of beginning to develop there, but it's sort of just in the early stages. And so the other slides I have are about some work I did in peace and post-conflict computing in Liberia, and some work, let's see, I'm wondering, because there's this third project that we're continuing right now, which is to develop social media aggregation platforms, especially for crisis response, election monitoring, early warning, that kind of thing. And maybe what I could do is give you a quick look at some of that
Yeah.
stuff? Okay, so I'm not going to give you all this. No, no.
While you do that, unfortunately I have to go in a bit, but I wanted to mention that one of our colleagues, Caroline Mormana-Larsen, is a women or gender and ICT expert. So I'll give you her email address also if you're not already in touch with her. She would be really interested. She will be here tomorrow, so you'll get a chance to talk to her because I'm sure she'll
Yeah, she would be.
send
Oh,
Alice
okay.
Yeah.
friends. But I can hear that there's a
I
lot
think
of
it's a good
synergies.
idea.
That would be great. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to.
Don't steal her though.
No,
No.
you're not allowed.
She can't go to Macau.
What?
She has to be in Malta.
Don't steal her.
Unless we all
From
move
us.
to Macau.
Yeah, if she goes, we have to go with her. We can't be alone.
Oh, don't steal her.
Yeah.
I make no promises. Yeah, I'm trying not to poach people, but then at the same time, I just got this email actually where people are like, who can we steal? It's sort of, an active idea.
Actually, he votes for us.
So let me, because some, people I know, more of you, many of you have to leave in 6-7 minutes. So let me quickly just gloss this project so that you can see this is more a technical project. Right now we have 3 social scientists, 1 person who sits between, and 2 computer scientists amongst our staff. So just so you know, the academic staff, kind of the range. This is very technical work mostly. We're building these software platforms. And so what this came out of is this activity we were involved with in Nigeria originally, where they were very focused on the election from 5 years ago and interested in sort of the way social media might be used to help with election monitoring in real time and aggregation, analysis, and response around election activities and irregularities. So we built this social media aggregation platform called Aggie. This is the very first interface, and we've been refining it ever since, and we worked with this civil society group. But the platform, which is basically designed to, in real time, aggregate multiple media sources, social media and other media types as well, and to allow for real-time analysis, the understanding of potential incidents, and then real-time actionable response. And so the Aggie system, this is the software platform that we continue to develop, goes to the internet. Sources across the net are curated, and these sources can come from Facebook, Ushahidi, Twitter, anything you can syndicate over RSS. These field formal observer systems, a particular technology that also was developed in partnership with my lab by the Carter Center in Atlanta, called ELMO. It's essentially another system that allows trained observers to do field data. So these sources are curated, reports are captured, relevant reports are identified via the system and human analysis, and then trends are visualized in real time, and then things that look like actionable reports are brought together into what we call incidents. And so the idea is that, for instance, in election monitoring, a trained group of social media observers can be watching in real time reports over grassroots reports, right, over social media, but also from formal trained election observers, can be in real time testing for relevance, grouping relevant reports into actionable incidents, escalating those and testing for veracity, and then, where appropriate, actually taking action via our collaborators. In the case of Nigeria's election, this collaborators included the Independent Electoral Commission. If there was, for instance, an electoral irregularity, a polling place ran out of ballot papers, it could be the military or police security forces, for instance, in the case of bomb threats or actual bombs or killings or that kind of stuff, and all these things happen in our actual activities. And we've deployed the system in Nigeria, Liberia, Ghana, Kenya, and a handful of other.
Maybe Uganda next.
Maybe Uganda?
Please.
When is the election?
February next year.
Did you guess the outcome?
Oh, it's not really
Yeah.
sure.
No, but Sweden is subjective about Uganda, so.
Yeah. In the closed room. Maybe.
So this is just a a picture from the original tracking center we had in Abuja during the Nigerian election, and some of the very early visualizations in this election, especially in the north of Nigeria. There was violence, and we were working with the Coordination Center for the Security Response to help them respond to social media reports of violence. So there were times when where social media was in front of the electoral observers, the election commission, and the security forces, and we were informing them to actually dispatch troops. And this is a series of reports that came in and were aggregated into an incident about these two sisters who were at a polytechnic in Kano in the north of Nigeria, and there were groups of people militarizing around their hostel, and they were very scared, and through this system troops were dispatched to escort them.
Question here, is it UN that brings you into this, or is it UN bringing you into these? Or
This was not UN.
no, it's not at all. I mean, they have nothing to do with kind of saying that call these guys and they can help.
UN?
Yeah.
No. All of that is civil society groups. We just built a platform.
UN has no kind of.
Yeah, you can imagine the difficult, the trickiness when.
UN is about governments.
Yeah.
Giving them
So-
capability of
This
No,
is.
I'm just wondering if they kind of.
Yeah.
What this means going forward, I think, is an interesting question. And when could we use this? One of the things that right now, and we'll see if this platform could be of help, and here's sort of some mock-ups of the current system, is we're working with the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, DPKO, which PS is mostly in Entebbe. I don't know if you know this Entebbe Center, the Blue Helmet folks.
He's from Entebbe.
So the Blue Helmet folks have this huge new center in Entebbe. You're from Entebbe.
Yes.
So we're working with the Entebbe people to see how we could actually do some of this work with the UN peacekeepers and allow social media to help them with early warning and response, and maybe turn this platform towards that kind of activity, which is very different than what we did in Nigeria around election monitoring, but I think could be very exciting. And frankly, the UN peacekeepers, I think they now know the internet exists, but only just. I mean, it's a really very old school operation, and so there's a lot of scope for helping them with innovation in the internet. And because one of the things that the UN is it's very clubby, and so it does help that we're in the system. And we really have entree to the peacekeepers that I think could be very powerful here.
We sorry to say so, but Ed and I, we have another very kind of.
You mentioned the veracity.
So here's mine, but on the other side is also my colleague's, which you will meet tomorrow, I'm sure. And thank you so much. Really interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Yeah, my
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Michael.
Nice to see you.
Sorry for this rush, but this is
The life of it.
You mentioned the veracity. Is there some kind of automatic system of checking the veracity?
I would say it's mostly not very automatic. It includes a lot of human intelligence, but the automation part is triangulation as the main, somewhat automated thing. Triangulation across media types. And that includes now the ELMA system, the formal trained observers. In practice, what generally happens in terms of triangulation is something, say for instance, comes over social media and then a veracity team, it's the way these is set up, would either look to see whether there is verification across media types, including trained known observers, or could alert an observer via the system to check something out. Oh, we just got a report that this polling place, there's a fist fight in the queue. Again, using the election example. Is somebody around and can you go check out this polling place and see if there really is fist fights? And so that was what has happened in our more recent uses of the system. And actually the system was deployed in Argentina 2 weeks ago for their election and in Venezuela last week for their election. And, you know, it's
No, because always there are unforeseen events, you know, and things, you know, but many of the things are actually can be classified and categorized and everything. So maybe in addition, you know, in addition to human intervention, which probably then is the most important, you know, there are many things that you can make more automatic.
would love.
The analysis.
Would love. Now, I've had quite a handful of computational scientists explore various approaches, mostly clustering, finite principal component, and k-means, and all the sort of different kinds of clustering things.
Okay.
Nothing so far has worked well.
Okay.
The other thing might be natural language approaches, but that becomes tricky because, you know, that requires you to normally know what the language is.
Yeah, yeah.
And all these problems, and of course, even if we're talking about Nigeria, the English might include a lot of
Local dialect.
local dialect. So NLP approaches, we've gotten, you know, limited success. So the obvious thing, which was things like principal component stuff or other clustering approaches, I think the problem is it's a signal to noise problem. There is so much junk. And so the approaches that we've attempted just cluster junk and you don't notice the non-junk. I think it's a great question. I just would love to make more progress in you know.
I mean, since it's a composite program, you know, in order to achieve a certain satisfying, you know, certain quality of the inference, you know, you probably have to use a couple of different methods. You
Yes.
know, and in parallel, to check each other, you know, this kind of portfolio reasoning, you know. But might be an interesting area for cooperation also.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a great challenge for.
It is.
And it's good data sets, and we could share with you the data anytime you're ready, just to, I mean, some data, anytime you want to just noodle around and play with data and see, then throw some methods and ideas at it and see what you might discover, because they're neat data sets. But you know, I think it's a space for active research, and it's tricky. There's also, you know, there's been folks who've done supervised learning kind of things, those sorts of approaches, and that's another whole category of potential ways to do some automatic classification, or even unsupervised learning. But it's another category of sorts of approaches that might bear fruit. I'm not sure if our data has. I gave that data to the folks who've been doing the supervised learning, and as far as I know, never heard whether they made progress. But of course, the problem there is this is really built for real-time response, and so there's a problem if you really need tagged data. How would that work in terms of real-time stuff?
Yeah, because you mentioned in one of the slides, you know, mentioned that one of the third things is about when you're talking about data, and I like, you know, call it a small data or whatever, you know, because otherwise these buzzwords is becoming overwhelming, you know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say too much. But what you said is that trust, you know, and then trust, building the trust is really require, it's a very complex process, you know, and it requires different sources,
Yeah.
different, so there's the reason maybe combination with automation that will at least eliminate the usual noise.
I
Let me
think
put it
that
this
that's
way.
exactly the right approach, that you know, it would be foolish to think we're gonna automate the humans out of
No,
this.
no, no, of course.
But the question is, how can we make it easier? And one of the things, this system, and I think I have a slide here, the system is basically designed for fairly high volume, so it's
Yeah.
designed for 1,000 reports a second. Well, it's impossible, even for teams of, say, 10, 20 people, which is what kind of we have often in these cases.
And
So
how
where
large
to
is the
find-
report? What is the size of a report? Doesn't really,
A report could be a tweet, a single tweet.
okay.
It could be a Facebook update. It could be a blog post. It could be, you know, those are the sizes, that kind of thing. So usually it's pretty smallish. But 1,000
A thousand.
and that's way too, so we need a combination. And the system right now does accommodate 1,000 and does all sorts of things that are not super sophisticated to help a team of people to work at those scales. But man, it's just, we're not there yet at all. And if, you know, actually the best thing right now, in terms of my sense of the data, is not that if it could decide what an incident is, or test veracity automatically, if it could get rid of 90% of the junk.
Yeah,
If it could take 1,000 a second, but
Go
let's
to
say
50.
only 50
Yeah.
are worth a human to look
Yeah.
at. We don't know what they are, we don't know why, we just know that they're worth looking at.
into.
That would be awesome. But it turns out that the difference between junk and non-junk, to date anyway, we haven't found a method to make that distinction.
Yeah, because if you missed something that you qualified as a junk, you know.
Well, there's the sort of precision recall issue or whatever, of course. You don't want to, and some of these things, you know, even in the actionable responses, it's things where you might only have 10 reports that you, in the end, escalate all the way to a response. So that's not, if we're talking about in the end, millions of reports in a day, hundreds or thousands a second even, 10 is teeny. So it's a real interesting data problem. And it's different than many others. Of course, there's plenty of people who do social media analysis. Things that are different here is that it's multiple sources, real time, and action. It's not just trying to provide a daily report as to, you know, what people are saying about you in social media. And it's not trying, you know, it's trying to, and real time, we're very clear what we mean about that. We mean from report to response in 1 hour. That's real time. Because in the case of, say, an election, an earthquake,
Yeah, of course.
a bomb, or whatever, an hour is about the longest time you can imagine between a report and action. If it was a day, which is the traditional social media aggregation and analysis model, for an election, or for
That's too
a
late.
bomb, it's over. There is no day.
Yeah.
An hour is short, you know, about as much time as you can allow. So, you know, kind of that is one of the worries in which this is a unique platform, because we're building it for a lot of reports, but basically you have 1 hour event horizon between something showing up and you being able to make sense of it and do something. So,
This is being implemented right now.
sorry?
This is
Aggie?
Aggie is
Aggie or.
being implemented somewhere? Are you
It is,
testing it or
It
doing
exists,
implement?
like
It is
Yeah.
being used.
yeah, well, like I said, last week
Election.
in Venezuela and the week before in Argentina, that was Aggie.
Okay.
Teams in Buenos Aires were using the system. the system's used quite routinely for election monitoring.
Anything else?
Well, not yet.
But is Aggie a product of UNU or you are
Aggie started in my lab at Georgia Tech, and it's now a UNU project. And so I've hired people to work from UN UCS now. But we have teams in Georgia Tech still, and we have teams of independent developers working on it. So it's kind of a consortium across Tech, UNU, some other organizations. Carter Center is involved. You know, it's a bunch of different folks.
Your verification is done by CSOs on
Yeah.
ground?
Yeah, so the users of the platform are always, so far, have been CSOs. Though, you know, you could imagine a government electoral body or a government something or other doing it, using it. You could imagine a UN peacekeeper using it. But to date, it's always been CSOs. And I like, you know, personally, there's good reasons why they're good partners and, you know.
Okay.
Well, thank you all very much, and, you know, I'd love to find ways to collaborate, send you data, do other things. Have you come by? Hire
Thank
your
you.
graduates?
Thank you for sharing with us. This is very interesting. And I think there are areas of collaboration. We from Spider
Yeah,
would be very good to keep in touch.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Share research,
Mm.
yeah. from data.
And you know, I can't underline enough that we're just new, so
Yeah.
all this stuff is just in its infancy. And you know, when I talk about this project, this really is a project that we've moved from Georgia Tech
Yeah,
to UNU.
sure.
But all these other things, it's really, everything's possible.
Mm.
And our goal is to really ensure that we're doing quality research and policy impact, and we're picking the right things and the right partners. That's not easy, obviously. None of these things are easy.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And some of you I'll be seeing tomorrow.
Yeah.